Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is Mabra Ahmed, your SAT English trainer for NOP 2020. I hope you're all doing well. Today's agenda is that we would be going through the SAT English writing section, and we would be looking at the structure of the SAT writing section, and we would also be looking at some questions that the writing section comprises of. You are already aware of what the SAT English test pattern looks like. There are three sections: the reading, writing and essay section. तीनों sections में different number of questions होते हैं, different ways of tackling the questions होते हैं. इसी तरह हम आज writing section को देखेंगे कि एक तो writing section का overview, how the writing section structure looks like, and what are the types of questions, and then standard English conventions. What exactly do we need to have a good command on when we say that हम standard English conventions की जब बात करते हैं तो हमारे पास grammar knowledge, sentence structure की knowledge थोड़ी बहुत होनी चाहिए. So this is what standard English conventions is going to be all about. We'll discuss this in detail in a while. Then 7 tips to ace SAT writing. Yes, very important. हम आज ये टिप्स डिस्कस करेंगे कि हमारे लिए सैट इंग्लिश में कौन सी ऐसी टिप्स हैं जो जब हम सैट राइटिंग सेक्शन कर रहे होते हैं उसमें हमारे लिए ये हेल्पफुल साबित होती हैं. एंड नॉट ओनली विल वी टॉक अबाउट द टिप्स, वी विल आल्सो बी अप्लाइंग देम टू द क्वेश्चंस दैट वी वुड बी डूइंग फ्रॉम द बुक दैट यू ऑल हैव. वी विल बी डूइंग सम सैंपल practice questions and we will be applying those tips, we will be using those tips, and we'll see how helpful they are going to prove to be. So this is our agenda for today's session. Let's move on and see what the overview of the writing section looks like. All right. So the writing section has 44 questions and there are 11 in one passage, which means I'm sure हम सब math में तो बहुत अच्छे हैं. Number of passages are 4 and each passage has around 400 to 450 words, which means कि passages generally इतने लंबे नहीं होते हैं, उनको हम जल्दी से read कर सकते हैं. उनकी language भी comparatively easier होती है as compared to the reading section. Then the time duration that we have for the writing section for all those 44 questions is 35 minutes. Suggested time for one question is 47 seconds approximately. Now you might be wondering कि 47 seconds में तो मैं सिर्फ question read कर पाता हूँ, तो मैं ये questions कैसे solve करूँगा in 35 minutes, 44 questions. Now guys, writing section के questions की nature बहुत different होती है and it's comparatively easier to handle and tackle those questions. कुछ questions में हम hardly in a few seconds उनको attempt करके next question की तरफ चले जाते हैं, तो कुछ questions पे तो हमें 47 seconds भी नहीं लगते. So this is how we can manage our time, and if we find a question difficult, we can always give it a few more seconds as per the requirement. So this is what the overview of the writing section looks like. Moving on, the types of questions. In the writing section, we have questions mostly based on the following. Questions for standard English conventions, हमारी grammar, हमारी sentence structure की knowledge, हमारी reading जब हम कर रहे होते हैं उसमें English को कितना हमें sentence coherent लग रहा है, कितना understand करने में हमारे लिए clear है, ये सारी चीजें they fall into the category of standard English convention, sentence structure, usage of words and punctuation. Then expression of ideas. पैसेज को किस तरीके से एक्सप्रेस किया गया है, उसमें आइडियाज को किस तरीके से इन डिटेल बताया गया है, उस चीज़ की अंडरस्टैंडिंग भी हमें होनी चाहिए. एंड क्वेश्चंस माइट कम बेस्ड ऑन द काइंड ऑफ एक्सप्रेशन दैट इज देयर इन द पैसेज एंड आस्क अस टू फाइंड इंफॉर्मेशन अबाउट दैट. वर्ड्स एंड कॉन्टेक्स्ट. एट टाइम्स वी माइट गेट क्वेश्चंस जिनमें हमसे वर्ड का मीनिंग पूछा गया हो कि वो पैसेज में किस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में यूज हो रहा है. Then the next thing is command of evidence. I'm sure you all know and you all must be aware of the fact that SAT English में जब भी हम कोई question कर रहे होते हैं हमारे पास reason होना चाहिए to choose a particular answer. Otherwise we cannot really be very sure कि ये answer ठीक है. So to have strong evidence from the passage and the reason to choose a particular answer, we need to have that kind of command when we are doing the writing section as well. It also depends on our understanding of the passage and the language of the passage. So ये हमारे पास evidence होनी चाहिए to choose a specific answer. Then lastly, analysis. हमारे पास क्वेश्चंस जो हैं वो डिफरेंट सब्जेक्ट्स डिफरेंट डिसिप्लिन्स पे बेस्ड हो सकते हैं, क्योंकि पैसेजेस जो होते हैं दे कुड बी बेस्ड ऑन मैथ, रीडिंग, राइटिंग एंड लैंग्वेज। तो हमारा एनालिसिस भी जो है वो उसके अकॉर्डिंगली होता है। देयर माइट बी अ क्वेश्चन बेस्ड ऑन नंबर्स, सो you just have to analyze, you just have to understand कि question हमसे किस तरह की डिमांड कर रहा है, right? All right, so moving on, writing types of questions. Now standard English convention, हम इसकी अभी हम पिछली उस स्लाइड में बात कर चुके हैं. So standard English convention questions require you to edit passages for, हमें passages को at times change करना पड़ सकता है for sentence structure. If we read a sentence in a passage and we have a question related to that particular sentence, क्या वो सेंटेंस हमें ठीक लग रहा है, क्या उस सेंटेंस को हमें चेंज करने की जरूरत है, क्या उस सेंटेंस को हमें रिप्लेस करने की जरूरत है completely. This is what sentence structure is all about. Then the flow of the passage, how sentences are coherent in a flow of the passage. तो ये सारी चीजें they fall under the category of sentence structure. Then usage. Usage could be of anything. Usage could be of punctuation marks. It could be the use of words. तो हमें इसको भी passage में change करना पड़ सकता है if the need arises and if the questions are asking you to do so. Then lastly, standard English conventions also ask you to punctuate the passage correctly. Questions might be based on punctuation marks कि हमने capitalization ठीक की हुई है, हमने punctuation marks such as colon, semicolon and full stops, commas, ये सब ठीक से use किए हुए हैं या नहीं. ठीक है? So this is what standard English convention is all about for the SAT writing section. Okay, now I'm going to walk you through standard English convention sentence structures, sentence structure key types. We would be looking at ways in which we might have to read a sentence and we might have to make changes to it. So observing standard usage practices including, number one, recognizing and correcting problems with parallelism. This word might be new for someone in the class and it might be a word that you guys are already familiar with. This word is basically all about keeping consistency in a sentence structure. For example, she likes running, swimming and hiking. अब इसमें हमारे पास 3 action words हैं, 3 verbs हैं और ये तीनों verbs जो हैं they are in the same tense, right? The verb tense remains the same, it remains consistent throughout the sentence. This is what parallelism is all about. Not switching between different verb tenses. This is what parallelism looks like in a sentence. Then verb consistency. Inappropriate shifts in verb tense, mood and voice. Once again, verbs जो हैं, they should be consistent throughout the sentence. Changing inappropriately from past to present tense. ये गलती नहीं होनी चाहिए. हमें बहुत केयरफुल होकर पैसेज को रीड करते हुए कुछ पर्टिकुलर क्वेश्चंस ऐसे होते हैं जिसमें हमें वी माइट हैव टू मेक चेंजेस. तो उन ऑप्शंस में हमें ये जरूर देखना है कि टेंसेस जो है दे आर यूज्ड कंसिस्टेंटली एंड वी आर नॉट स्विचिंग बिटवीन द टेंसेस. नेक्स्ट, inappropriate shifts in pronoun person and number. Example, changing inappropriately from second person you to third person one. This is very important कि हम अगर pronouns use कर रहे हैं in a sentence और उस sentence में subject सिर्फ one है, so we cannot quickly change from one subject to a number of subjects, or we could not change inappropriately from second person to third person, right? So this is very important that you stay consistent with the pronoun structure and also with the number of the nouns, right? Next, concise sentences if asked to rephrase. Very important. When we say economy of expression, हमें इस चीज को माइंड में रखना है कि हमारे जितने भी वर्ड्स यूज हुए हुए इन अ सेंटेंस उनमें कोई वर्ड रेपिटेटिव ना हो. सेंटेंस का मीनिंग जो है वो बिल्कुल ही अनक्लियर हो जाता है जब हम अननेसेसरीली वर्ड्स ऐड कर देते हैं और सेंटेंस को लॉन्ग कर देते हैं. सेंटेंस हैज टू रिमेन मीनिंगफुल एंड कंसाइज. So we might have to rephrase it depending on a question that might ask us to add it a sentence to rephrase it from within the passage. So it depends on what the question is demanding you to do. Then transitional words or phrases between paragraphs. Very important concept. हमें हो सकता है कि transitional words को edit करना पड़ जाए या phrases को switch करना पड़ जाए between paragraphs in order to make the passage more coherent and understandable. Okay, So this was about the sentence structure. Now let's look at some examples of all of these terms that we've just talked about. Okay, so let's look at parallelism first. Example, he likes baseball and running. Now, when we read this sentence, it might not sound very appropriate, very clear. What's wrong with this sentence? If you look at the sentence, you can see कि उसमें उसका एक interest है baseball और दूसरा है running. तो दोनों चीजें जो है वो consistent नहीं है. Running जो है it's kind of confusing for us. He likes baseball and running. अब baseball तो it's a game and running is an action. So this is a noun and this is an action word. So in order to bring consistency to the sentence, how we can play around with words and how we can change them, or how we can edit the sentence for making it clearer. He likes playing baseball and running. Now this is how the sentence is going to make perfect sense, and using the word playing is going to make it very clear that we are talking about two activities that the person, the subject, likes to do. One is playing baseball and the other one is running. And then another way in which we could correct this sentence is he likes to play baseball and to run. अब यहाँ पे to play baseball and to run ये दोनों consistent हैं. So parallelism is perfectly clear in these two examples, and not in the first one, but in the next two sentences you can see parallelism. You can see consistent verb sentence structure and the tense of the verbs. Next we have transitional words and phrases. अब इनको हम जब यूज करते हैं सेंटेंसेस में, तो हमें ये देखना होता है कि ये सेंटेंसेस में अप्रोप्रिएटली यूज हुए में हो. एक सेंटेंस से दूसरे सेंटेंस में ट्रांजिशन विद द हेल्प ऑफ दीज वर्ड्स. लेट्स लुक एट सम एग्जांपल्स. एंड, in addition to, furthermore, moreover, besides, then, to, also, as well as, another, equally. अब कुछ इसमें phrases हैं जैसे कि in addition to, as well as, ठीक है, और कुछ transitional words हैं. इनका correct usage हमें आना चाहिए. इनको हमें पता होना चाहिए कि एक sentence से दूसरे sentence में जाने के लिए इनमें से किस word को कहाँ use करना है. So this is really important that we understand the use and the meaning of these words and how we are going to use them. Next we have inappropriate shifts in pronouns. Let's look at an example. When Lisa and Kim finally landed, she breathed a sigh of relief. अब इसमें हमें क्या चीज गलत नजर आ रही है इस सेंटेंस में? There are two people in the sentence, but the pronoun is she. For she, we need to have just one subject over here, but we have two subjects, Lisa and Kim, in the sentence. So we need to correct this. We need to change this pronoun. We might have to edit the sentence altogether. And how we are going to change it? When Lisa and Kim finally landed, they breathed a sigh of relief. Okay, so this is the correction, a small correction that we need to make to the sentence. Okay. Next we have verb consistency, inappropriate shifts in verb tense. Example sentence. I walked to the store and I bought milk. अब ये sentence एकदम से पढ़ने में तो हमें शायद ठीक लगे, लेकिन if I look at the sentence, I would realize कि हमारे पास जो first action word है walk, वो तो present tense में है, but the next action word is in the past tense, bought. तो ये चीज हमारे पास problematic है and it's incorrect. Of course it is incorrect. How we can correct it? There are two ways in which we can correct the sentence. I walk to the store and I buy milk. Now this is showing verb consistency. Verb tense is consistent. It's the same for the entire sentence. And then next what we can do is I walked to the store and I bought milk. तो ये sentence भी correct है because इसमें हम दोनों के parts of the sentence में we are using the verb tense past tense, right? We are using walked and we are using bought. And then another example could be, let's read a new sentence. Those who want a good workout needed different kinds of equipment than those interested in an easy ride. अच्छा, अब ये sentence हम start में जब पढ़ रहे थे तो ये present tense था, एकदम से needed past tense में आ गया. So this is not making sense when we read this sentence. How we can correct this? Let's correct it. Those who want a good workout need different kinds of equipment than those interested in an easy ride. Yes, now this makes it very clear कि हमारे पास सेंटेंस में वर्ब टेंस जो है वो कंसिस्टेंट होना चाहिए थ्रू आउट द सेंटेंस. इट शुड रिमेन द सेम. इफ इट्स पास्ट टेंस देन पास्ट टेंस थ्रू आउट द सेंटेंस, एंड इफ इट्स प्रेजेंट टेंस इट शुड रिमेन एज प्रेजेंट टेंस थ्रू आउट द सेंटेंस. अच्छा, अब लास्टली लुकिंग एट रीफ्रेजिंग. Whenever we are rephrasing a sentence, make sure that the subject is always mentioned in the beginning, which means that we should always write in an active voice instead of passive voice. Let's look at an example. When I started my own business, it has given me a whole new perspective to see the bigger picture when it comes to finding a work-life balance. एक तो ये सेंटेंस जो है थोड़ा एम्बिगुअस है, इसमें बहुत ज़्यादा चीज़ें जो है एक्सप्लेन की गई हैं और टुवर्ड्स द एंड ऑफ द सेंटेंस द रीडर इज कम्प्लीटली लॉस्ट. So we need to rephrase the sentence to make it understandable for the reader and to make it clearer and meaningful. So how we can rephrase it? By using economy of expression, we can reduce the number of words and we can completely edit the sentence. Let's read how we can correct it. Starting my own business has given me a new perspective on work-life balance. जो incorrect sentence था उसमें when I started my own business तो past tense में, it has given me, ये बिल्कुल ही sentence को ambiguous कर देता है. So we need to rephrase this sentence so that it makes sense, and the example given at the bottom is a perfect way of rephrasing it. Next up, we have conventions of usage, which is also a part of standard English conventions. Let's see अब हमें standard usage practices में कौन-कौन सी चीजों को mind में रखना होता है. The first point is possessive determiners. Distinguishing between and among possessive determiners, it's, your, their. हमें इनका डिफरेंस पता होना चाहिए इन possessive determiners का. We'll also be looking at more examples and what possessive determiners are. Contractions और possessive determiners में बहुत difference है. It's और its में बहुत difference है. It's जब apostrophe के साथ होता है, it means it's a short form of it is. Whereas when it's without an apostrophe, it is showing possession. Your and your में बहुत फर्क है. Your pronunciation is the same. However, with an apostrophe, your is basically a short form of you are, and your is a word, it's a noun, it's a pronoun, right? And then we have they are. अब there और there में बहुत बड़ा difference है. There is a short form of they are, and there it's a pronoun. Adverbs भी होते हैं. There और there में बहुत difference है, ये हमें पता होना चाहिए. Then agreement. Ensuring agreement between subject and verb, between pronoun and antecedent, and between nouns. Very important. The number of nouns should be agreeing with the number of verbs in the sentence. अगर singular noun है तो singular ही verb tense भी होगा, verb structure भी होगा, और अगर plural noun है तो plural verb structure होगा, right? Lastly, frequently confused words. Distinguishing between and among words that are commonly mistaken for one another. For example, effect and effect. अब ये कुछ words ऐसे हैं जिनमें हमें confusion होती है, तो हमें इनका difference ज़रूर पता होना चाहिए. Let's look at some more examples for these terms and make it more clearer for us to understand them. Right. So possessive determiners. A possessive determiner is a type of function word used in front of a noun to express possession or belonging, as in my phone. Another example could be my phone, its bag, right? So these are some examples जो हम use कर सकते हैं, and this is showing us that the word is showing us possession, such as my, its, without an apostrophe, of course. The possessive determiners in English are my, your, his, her, its, our, and their, but excluding those forms such as mine, yours, ours, and theirs that are used as possessive pronouns but not as determiners. So there's a difference. Make sure that you know that the difference is of the word pronouns and determiners. Determiners में हमारे पास possession जो है, it's referring to a person particularly or to a group of people, whereas in possessive pronouns it might refer to the person person in a completely different manner, and it might be used towards the end of the sentence, right? So this is very important that you keep this in mind. Next, we have pronoun antecedent agreement. Antecedent is basically a word that the pronoun refers back to. For example, Lisa had her cup of tea. Now we are definitely going to understand कि इस sentence में antecedent क्या है, but हमें पहले पता होना चाहिए sentence में pronoun कौन सी है. Of course, the pronoun is her, and the antecedent that the pronoun refers back to is Lisa. So this is the antecedent. It's also the subject and the noun in the sentence, but also known as the antecedent. इसका agreement होना चाहिए. अगर मैं इस sentence को कहूँ Lisa had his cup of tea or Lisa had their cup of tea, तो ये completely गलत हो जाएगा, because then pronoun antecedent agreement नहीं होगा, because it's not going to be consistent with the antecedent. The pronoun is different and the antecedent is completely different. Next, we have subject-verb agreement. Both subject and verb must agree in number, as I've already told you. Both need to be singular or plural. Examples: the girl has talked to me. Now over here, the girl and the verb has, they both show that we are talking about a singular subject, and therefore the verb structure is also singular. It's a singular verb. In the next example, the girls have talked to me. Have is a plural verb and girls is a plural subject or a plural noun. So this subject verb agreement is very, very important. Frequently confused words, effect, there, among, between. This is very important that we know कि इनको हमने किस तरीके से tackle करना है, right? Okay, moving on. Standard English conventions for conventions of punctuation. Punctuation का तो हम सबको पता है. Punctuation is using punctuation marks such as commas, full stops, capital letters, question marks, colon, semicolon, dashes, ये सारी चीजें. अब हमें इनका यूजेज थोड़ा सा उसका पता होना चाहिए, हम वो भी डिस्कस करेंगे, बट लेट्स जस्ट गो थ्रू दीज पॉइंट्स एंड फाइंड आउट व्हाट वी माइट हैव टू करेक्ट क्वेश्चंस इन अ राइटिंग सेक्शन व्हेन वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट पंक्चुएशन. Point number 1, within sentence punctuation, correctly using and recognizing and correcting misuses of colons, semicolons and dashes. इनका हमें अगर इनकरेक्टली ये यूज हुए में तो we might have to correct them, और अगर ये unnecessarily यूज हुए में we might have to eliminate them altogether. So this is what we need to look for when we are doing a question based on within sentence punctuation from a passage. Next, possessive nouns and pronouns. Recognizing and correcting inappropriate uses of possessive nouns and pronouns and deciding between plural and possessive forms. Very important. हमें पता होना चाहिए कि possessive nouns और pronouns में क्या difference है. We will be looking at their examples in the next few minutes. Let's look at the last point. Items in a series. Using commas and sometimes semicolons to separate elements in lists. Once again, usage of commas and semicolons should be very, very clear. Let's look at some examples of the usage of these punctuation marks. Okay. So first of all, we have the use of semicolon. The most common use of the semicolon is to join two closely related independent clauses without using a conjunction like and. अब हमारे पास जब two independent clauses होते हैं जो कि obviously related भी होते हैं, लेकिन हम उनको as separate sentences भी लिख सकते हैं, उनको हम full stop के साथ भी separate कर सकते हैं. जब हम उनको connect कर रहे होते हैं, we might have to insert a semicolon over there. Let's look at the example. I drank lemonade, Melissa had tea. अब यहाँ पर ये जो middle में semicolon है, it's showing a relationship between the two independent clauses, and of course it's also showing that there is no conjunction in between them. However, the semicolon is, we can make good use of the semicolon to join these two independent clauses without a conjunction, without a connective, right? Then another usage of the semicolon is link two independent clauses which are joined by conjunctions such as however, therefore, otherwise. अब यहाँ पर हमारे पास एक एग्जाम्पल है और यहाँ पर हम इंडिपेंडेंट क्लॉजेस को ज्वाइन करें विद a conjunction. यहाँ पर first case से completely different हमारे पास condition है. Here we are using a conjunction, a connective, to join two independent clauses. Example: the specimens were treated properly, however, they were not stored properly. अब अगर हम यहाँ पर देखें तो हमारे पास ये जो semicolon है, it's used right before the conjunction, and after the conjunction there is a comma. Now this sentence structure is showing us a connection between the two independent clauses. इनको हम separate sentences के तौर पे भी लिख सकते हैं, तभी हम इनको independent clauses कहते हैं. लेकिन इनका connection आपस में बनाने के लिए, because these two are related to each other, we join them with the help of a conjunction, and we also join them with the help of a semicolon right before the conjunction. Third condition where we use a semicolon is to divide the items of a list if the items are long and need strong pauses. Let's look at the example sentence. Our family members came all the way from Denver, Colorado, Rochester, Minnesota, and even Paris, France. So our family members came all the way from Denver, Colorado. अब यहाँ पर जो आप देख सकते हैं कि सेमीकोलन जो है, they are separating the different countries and they have put semicolons to separate different regions, right? जैसे Denver is part of Colorado, Rochester is part of Minnesota, तो हमने and Paris and France ये last है इस list में, तो इनको separate करने के लिए we don't need the semicolon, but to separate the items in a list that are a little more detailed and that need pauses in between, that need breaks in between, strong pauses, हमें उनको semicolon से separate कर देना चाहिए, ठीक है? Now let's look at the use of another important punctuation mark, which is a colon. The colon is used to separate two independent clauses when the second explains or illustrates the first. Yes. अब यहाँ पर हमने दो इंडिपेंडेंट क्लॉजेस को सेपरेट करने के लिए कोलन को यूज करना होता है. सेकेंड part of the clause is mostly an explanation or an illustration of the first one. Let's look at the example. Humans use 5 major senses. अब ये वैसे तो एक sentence है, एक complete sentence है, but in order to inform the reader about what are those 5 senses, we have put a colon over here, and we have listed the senses in the next part of the sentence in the next independent clause: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. So this is an example of the usage of a colon when we connect two independent clauses which could be written separately with the help of a colon with the 2 dots. Okay. Then the next very tricky and a little bit confusing punctuation mark is a dash in a sentence. अब dashes जो होते हैं, ये with practice and with reading you would come across sentences जिनमें बहुत ज़्यादा frequent use of dashes होता है. They can be used for emphasis in several ways. At times ये sentences में breaks के लिए use होते हैं. At times they are emphasizing on something completely different. So let's look at an example. After 80 years of dreaming, the elderly man realized it was time to finally revisit the land of his youth, Ireland. अब ये पूरा sentence जो है, इसमें एक इंसान के बारे में बात की है कि he wanted to finally go back to the land of his youth. और वो एक it's kind of a suspense कि वो कौन सी जगह है. In order to emphasize on that, there is a dash, and after the dash we can see the name of the place, which is Ireland, right? So this is why we use dashes in a sentence. There could be more than one dash in a sentence depending on where we want to emphasize when we are writing a sentence, right? Possessive pronouns. The possessive pronouns are my, mine's, ours, yours, his, her, its, and their. And possessive pronouns are never spelled with apostrophes, unlike possessive nouns. Possessive nouns की examples I'm sure हम सबको पता होंगे. For example, this is the cat's paw. तो cats में हमारे पास ऊपर apostrophe आ जाती है. जब हम this is Sarah's bag, Sarah में हमारे पास s से पहले ऊपर apostrophe आ जाती है after a. तो इस वजह से हम उनको possessive nouns कहते हैं because उसमें there is a mention of the noun. However, in possessive pronouns, you simply have an s added to the pronoun structure, and that is why we call them possessive pronouns, because they are showing possession. For example, this house is ours. So ours is showing possession of the house in the sentence. All right. Okay. Next, we have observing standard punctuation practices, including, ये भी punctuation का ही एक हिस्सा है, non-restrictive and parenthetical elements, using punctuation to set off non-essential sentence elements, and recognizing and correcting cases in which punctuation is wrongly used to set off essential sentence elements. अब यहाँ पर हमें दो चीज़ों पे फोकस करना है. एक सेंटेंस में इंपॉर्टेंट इंफॉर्मेशन कौन सी है और अनइम्पॉर्टेंट इंफॉर्मेशन कौन सी है. जो इम्पॉर्टेंट इंफॉर्मेशन होती है उसको हम कहते हैं नॉन एसेंशियल सेंटेंस एलिमेंट्स, और जो इम्पॉर्टेंट नहीं होती है वी कॉल इट नॉन एसेंशियल सेंटेंस एलिमेंट्स और नॉन रिस्ट्रिक्टिव. Restrictive is basically essential. So we are going to look at some example sentences in the next few seconds. Last point is about unnecessary punctuation. Recognizing and eliminating unneeded punctuation. At times we see comma splices, बहुत unnecessarily commas use हुए होते हैं within a sentence. So that is what we might have to correct at times when we talk about the questions in the writing section. हमारे पास unnecessarily punctuation marks जो है passage में अगर हो, हम उनको punctuate कर सकते हैं if the question asks us to do that, right? Okay. So restrictive and non-restrictive sentence elements. Restrictive clause. Now restrictive or essential element in a sentence is the most important information in a sentence that identifies the exact way a noun should be understood. This is what we call a restrictive clause. Example, I drove to Paris with the women who used to live there. अब यहाँ पर हमारे पास I drove to Paris with the women who used to live there. ये information important है, with the women who used to live there, right? So this sentence has all the important information, which is why we cannot say कि with the women who used to live there is a non-restrictive or a non-essential sentence element. It is important for us to understand कि वो drive करके Paris गया किसके साथ, और अगर with the women, so who was that women, right? All right. So non-restrictive clause. Let's look at an example sentence for a non-restrictive clause. Provides extra information which is not required to understand the entire sentence. Now this is extra information, and the example sentence is, Jenny, who is our boss, ordered us to report to her office at the end of the day. अब यहाँ पर कौन सा आपको लगता है कि non-restrictive clause हो सकता है? Yes, so the non-restrictive clause is who is our boss. अब यहाँ पर अगर हम इस information को निकाल भी दें and we just read it, let's just pretend that it's not over here. Let's just assume this non-restrictive clause is not here. Let's read the sentence without it. Jenny ordered us to report to her office at the end of the day. We usually report to our seniors in an office, to our management, the higher management. तो ये तो obvious है कि Jenny जो है, this is a person who has more authority than the people who are being mentioned within the sentence, right? So ये who is our boss is non-restrictive because this is not essential information that is required to understand the sentence. The next example is, my car, which is 25 years old, often breaks down. अब ये which is 25 years old भी unnecessary information hai. It's a non-restrictive clause because it is providing us extra information which is not important to understand the complete sentence, right? Even without this, we know my car often breaks down. We are talking about a car which might be old, which might not be well maintained. Lastly, unneeded punctuation. Do not put commas or apostrophes where they are not required. This is also very important कि हमें पता हो कि हमें apostrophe और commas को कहाँ use करना है और कहाँ नहीं करना है, right? Okay. Now I would be discussing 7 tips with you all to ace SAT writing and language section. Now these tips, guys, when we talk about these tips, please make sure that when you're using these tips, when you're doing the writing section, you are applying these tips to your writing section questions. You are making good use of them because first thing, they might help you save your time. Second, they might help you avoid a panic-stricken situation. And thirdly, they might help you come up with the right answer. So this is very important that you make note of these 7 tips and try to understand them in order to have a good command over your writing section in SAT English. Let's look at the first tip. Tip 1. For consistency of style, read the 2 preceding sentences, determine the pattern that's been established, and choose the answer that's most consistent with that pattern. Now, it's very important कि हमारे रीडिंग सेक्शन में हमारे राइटिंग सेक्शन में जो सेंटेंस है वो उसमें उसके हर सेंटेंस में उस पैसेज के हर सेंटेंस में कंसिस्टेंसी होनी चाहिए बिकॉज अगर नहीं होगी तो हमें हो सकता है उस पर बेस्ड एक क्वेश्चन आ जाए जिसमें दे माइट आस्क अस टू मेक द पैसेज कोहेरेंट, मेक द पैसेज हैव अ फ्लो. सो उसके लिए हमारे पास ऐसी अंडरस्टैंडिंग होनी चाहिए कि हम उस पैसेज का पैटर्न डिटरमिन कर सकें. सेंटेंसेस को अंडरस्टैंड करने के लिए वी माइट हैव टू रीड प्रीसीडिंग सेंटेंसेस, वी माइट हैव टू रीड द सेंटेंसेस बिफोर द सेंटेंस दैट इज गोइंग टू बी बेस्ड ऑन द क्वेश्चन. हम अभी एक एग्जाम्पल क्वेश्चन देखते हैं जिससे हमें क्लियर हो जाएगा कि व्हाट इज दिस टिप exactly imply us to do. And let's look at an example question. Okay, now this is an example question number 1. I'm sure you all are aware कि writing section में जो questions होते हैं उनमें जहाँ पर भी number mentioned होता है within the passage उस number के से ही related question number भी होता है. For example, question 1 over here is relevant to this sentence, to this portion of the passage. So let's find out what the question is asking us to do. Which choice best maintains the sentence pattern already established in the paragraph? अब हमें इसके लिए पहले तो sentence pattern already established in the paragraph, उसके लिए हमें directly number 1 से start नहीं कर देना है passage को read करना, हमें पहले पीछे से पढ़ना होगा and फिर we'll come to number 1. So let's read from the beginning. A subway system is expanded to provide service to a growing suburb. A bike sharing program is adopted to encourage non-motorized transportation. To alleviate rush hour traffic jams in a congested downtown area, spotlight timing is coordinated. अब जब हमने ये सेंटेंस पढ़ा हमें रियलाइज हुआ कि बाकी पहले जो 2 सेंटेंसेस थे उनमें कुछ और तरह की लैंग्वेज थी, पैटर्न कंप्लीटली डिफरेंट था. व्हेन वी वर रीडिंग देम देयर वाज अ फ्लो. As soon as we started reading sentence right before number 1, right after number 1, we realized कि यहाँ पर एक बहुत ही different sentence pattern नजर आ रहा है हमें. अब हमें उसको consistent करने के लिए, because the question requires us to do so, we have to maintain the sentence pattern already established in the paragraph, throughout the paragraph, so we need to amend the sentence. So choice A automatically is not the right answer, because हमें इसको in any case change करना है. It's not consistent with the first 2 sentences. B. Coordinating stoplight timing can help alleviate rush hour traffic jams in a congested downtown area. Coordinating stoplight timing. अब अगर हम पहले 2 sentences पढ़ें उसमें direct start from the verb किसी भी sentence में नहीं हुआ है. So we cannot say that this is a sensible choice. Let's look at option C. Stoplight timing is coordinated to alleviate rush hour traffic jams in a congested downtown area. अब यहाँ पर हम देख सकते हैं कि पहले first 2 lines के साथ जो थोड़ा सा consistency show हो रही है वो C की show हो रही है, because when we read the sentence it is showing us the action word, the verb coordinated. First sentence में हमारे पास expanded था, a subway system is expanded. Second sentence में a bike sharing program is adopted. Then is option C में we can see stoplight timing is coordinated. So these 3 words are showing us relevance कि हमें इसको किस तरीके से consistent करना है. This word and this word and this word together, they make the pattern consistent, and you can see it's established when you replace sentence in option C with the sentence given in the passage originally. Option B. In a congested downtown area, Stoplight timing is coordinated to alleviate rush hour traffic jams. अब यहाँ पर भी प्रॉब्लम ये है कि ये जो पूरा पार्ट है, this is making the sentence pattern different from the previous sentence. Once again, it's not consistent. The pattern is changing over here. So in order to make it consistent, the option that makes most sense is going to be option C. Stoplight timing is coordinated to alleviate rush hour traffic jams in a congested downtown area. Right? So this is our correct answer. Let's move on to the next tip. Tip 2. Attempt questions on parallelism by making each compared item or idea in your sentence follow the same grammatical pattern. Yes, this is also very important. कि पैरेललिज्म पे बेस्ड क्वेश्चंस जो हैं उनको you should be making each compared item or idea in your sentence follow the same grammatical pattern, be it your verb tense, be it the structure of your sentence, be it the subject of your sentence. पैरेललिज्म होना चाहिए, ठीक है? और उसमें जो भी आइडिया है सेंटेंस में, it should have the same grammatical pattern, be it the verb, be it the noun. तो ये parallelism के लिए बहुत important है, right? Let's move on and look at the sample question related to this tip. Okay, so this is a question based on parallelism. Number 3. I will read the sentence from the beginning. The work of transportation planners generally includes evaluating current transportation needs, assessing the effectiveness of existing facilities and improving those facilities, or they design new ones. अब इसमें हमारे पास क्या चीज है जो चेंज होने वाली है? They design. We need to change the underlined portion of the sentence, just like we did in the previous question. When there was an underlined portion, we replaced it with a new sentence. तो अब इस क्वेश्चन में हमें इस पोर्शन को चेंज करने के लिए the first option is that we let it be no change. Second option is to design. Instead of they design, we do to design. Third option is designing and D is design. अच्छा, अब हम अगर सेंटेंस को रीड करें तो हमारे पास वर्ब्स कौन कौन सी हैं? We have evaluating, we have assessing, we have improving. ये 3 है जो कंसिस्टेंट हैं, राइट? तो अब इसी तरह हमारे पास जो यहाँ पर और दे डिजाइन न्यू वंस, ये बिल्कुल ही पैटर्न को डिस्टर्ब कर रहा है and it's not showing us parallelism throughout the sentence. So we can change it by using option C as the correct answer. Okay, and it's very clear कि हम option C को as the correct answer use कर सकते हैं और इसीलिए option C is going to be the right answer, or designing new ones, because it's consistent with the words evaluating, it's consistent with the word improving, it's consistent with the word assessing. So designing is going to go with all these 3 action words and it's going to make sense. It's the best choice for this question. Moving to the next tip. For questions testing economy of expression, offer a clear and concise wording without redundancy or wordiness. Okay, so now we need to make sure कि हमारे पास जब इकोनॉमी ऑफ एक्सप्रेशन की बात होती है तो हम वर्ड्स को इस तरीके से यूज करें कि the sentence should not become overworded. It should not have unnecessary words. It should not have extra words in it. And this is the most important thing in English language also, that we should not be making a sentence boring and monotonous by adding extra words to it just to make it sound impressive or anything of that sort. So it's very important that we do that. All right. So for questions testing economy of expression, offer a clear and concise wording without redundancy or wordiness. Now let's look at an example question and understand how can we rephrase sentences and how can we eliminate unnecessary words. Here's a question. Number 6. I am going to read out sentence number 6 right after the full stop. If analysis of the traffic count indicates that there is more traffic than the current road as it is designed, how are we going to look at this question now. अब यहाँ पर current road as it is designed at this time है. इस पूरे phrase में आपको क्या चीज गलत नजर आ रही है? The first thing that we look at is the word current, and then as it is designed at this time. Don't you think current and at this time, both of these, this phrase and this word has the same meaning? Both of them have the same meaning. How can we correct it? How can we make sure कि ये दोनों जो है इस पूरे sentence को हम rephrase कर दें, इसको edit कर दें, and we make it meaningful by eliminating either of the phrases or the words so that it makes sense. Now, the way to do it is going to be, if analysis of the traffic count indicates that there is more traffic than the current road. अब यहाँ पर हम इसको तो या तो हम current को eliminate करेंगे या फिर हम at this time को eliminate करेंगे. So the most sensible option to choose is going to be no change. So obviously it cannot be a possible answer. B, current design of the road right now. Once again, redundancy, overwordness. We don't need to add current and we don't need to add right now because both of them have the same meaning. So it's overworded. Then we have C, road as it is now currently designed. Once again, the word now and currently. In dono ka ek hi meaning hai. They both imply the same meaning. D, current design of the road. This is the phrase that makes sense. So this is going to be the right answer for the question. So let's make sure कि हम इसको correct answer को choose कर ले, which is going to be D. And let's now read it with option D. If analysis of the traffic count indicates that there is more traffic than the current design of the road can efficiently accommodate, the transportation planner might recommend widening the road to add another lane. So this is how we can correct a sentence, and we can make good use of the first step by eliminating words that are not required in a sentence and by being concise and simple and clear about what we are trying to explain in a passage. Next tip. Tip number 4. If a question asks you to choose the most appropriate transitional word or phrase at the beginning of a sentence, carefully consider how that sentence relates to the previous sentence. We are already aware of what transitional words are. We just discussed them a while ago and we looked at some examples of transitional words and phrases. अब जब हम उनको sentence में use करते हैं, हमें उनको देखना होता है कि वो उनका usage correctly हुआ है या नहीं हुआ. And if they make a connection with the previous sentence, according to the word that is being used, according to the transitional word that is being used to connect the sentences and to show transition from one sentence to another. Let's look at an example question and see how we can make sure कि हम transitional words को सही तरीके से use कर सकें. All right, so there's a question. Number 7. I'm going to read out the preceding line because as tip number 1 said, हमें हमेशा एक line preceding line ज़रूर पहले वाली पढ़नी चाहिए so that we could understand the question better. Transportation planners work closely with a number of community stakeholders such as government officials and other interested organizations and individuals. Yes. So next, representatives from the local public health department might provide input in designing a network of trails and sidewalks to encourage people to walk more. In the first part of the sentence, in the first sentence actually, the one that's there before the full stop, you can see that we're talking about government officials and other interested organizations and individuals. इसके फौरन बाद नंबर 7 के बाद हम बात करें representatives from the local public health department. अब ये जो representatives from the local public health department हैं, obviously these are related to the people who are working with the government. So they are the government officials, they are the organizations and the people working in those organizations, the individuals working in those organizations. So the word next is not going to make a lot of sense over here, okay? And that is the reason why we need to replace it with a better transitional word which makes more sense and which provides a perfect transition from this sentence to the next one. So next is going to be change, of course, which is why option A, could not be the right answer. Option B, for instance. अब अगर हम यहाँ पे for instance कर देते हैं, for instance means that we are providing an example of what we have stated in the preceding sentence. This makes sense because representatives from the local public health department, they are government people from the government and from the organizations that work with the government. So for instance is an option that makes sense. Furthermore provides an extension of what is being discussed previously. And this is not an extension, this is just an example of how representatives can actually provide their services when it comes to planning transportation and road networks, right? So furthermore is also not an option that we would consider at this point of time. Similarly, अब similarly कुछ लोगों को सही तो लगेगा, but similarly के साथ problem ये है कि the transition word similarly, it provides a comparison or contrast with the previous sentence. हम यहाँ पर कोई comparison या contrast नहीं कर रहे, हम यहाँ पे simply एक example provide कर रहे हैं कि transportation planners, how do they work with community stakeholders such as government officials and interested organizations and individuals. So this transition word is not providing us a comparison. Instead, the sensible choice, the most appropriate choice for this question is going to be B. So our correct answer is going to be option B. For instance, this is the right transitional phrase that we can use here so that we could provide correct transition from the previous sentence to this sentence, which is number 7, right? Okay, let's look at the next tip. Number 5. For questions testing subject-verb agreement or pronoun antecedent agreement, correctly identify the subject of the sentence. This is extremely important, everyone. Why we need to make sure that we identify the subject of the sentence correctly? Because जब हम subject-verb agreement की बात करते हैं, we have to make sure that the number of verbs or the number of pronouns, they agree with the subject, they agree with the noun mentioned in the sentence. So that is why we need to make sure कि हमें identification of the noun बहुत अच्छे तरीके से हो, which is also the subject of the sentence. Let's look at an example question. Number 2, when any one of these changes occur, it is likely the result of careful analysis conducted by transportation planners. अब यहाँ पर the problem with occur is कि it's not showing us consistency. If we look at the beginning of the sentence, when any one, we're talking about one out of all the changes, right? When any one of these changes occur, तो जब हम एक subject की बात करें, we're talking about just one subject. So why do we have a plural noun, a plural verb over here? We need to correct this verb. This is not making sense. So instead of this plural verb occur, we need to change it to a singular verb, and verbs जो हैं वो singular तब होती हैं जब हम उनके साथ s add कर देते हैं. So the right choice is definitely going to be either C or D, क्योंकि दोनों में occurs use हुआ है. When any one of these changes occurs, it is likely the result of careful analysis conducted by transportation planners. अच्छा, अब हमारे पास जो right option है वो या तो A तो हो नहीं सकती है because this is wrong. B occur, उसमें exactly वही verb use हुआ है, so it's not showing subject verb agreement. This number of subject is not agreeing with the number of verbs, so this is not going to be the right choice. अब C जो है, why it's not the right answer? Because right after C we can see occurs, we can see they are. When any one of these changes occurs, they are the result of careful analysis. Once again, हम लोग फिर से consistency नहीं maintain करें. We are switching between inappropriately between the number of subjects. So that is why this pronoun is not agreeing with the number of the subject, and we need to make sure that it agrees. So the most appropriate choice for this question is going to be option D, occurs. It is likely the result of careful analysis conducted by transportation planners. So that is how we see कि हम कैसे subject को identify करके we can make sure that the subject verb agreement is shown with the help of the pronoun or the verb that is being used in the other part of the sentence. Moving on, tip number 6. You must distinguish between restrictive, essential, and non-restrictive, non-essential sentence elements and avoid unneeded punctuation. We have already talked about what are restrictive and non-restrictive sentence elements. Important information in a sentence is restrictive or essential element in the sentence, and the necessary information जो होती है वो restrictive होती है, और जो information हमारे लिए sentence में इतनी important नहीं होती है, जिसके बगैर भी हम sentence को understand कर सकते हैं, it's called the non-restrictive or non-essential elements in the sentence. So we need to make sure कि हम इन दोनों को distinguish कर सकें ताकि हम punctuation जो है वो avoid कर सकें, incorrect punctuation, unneeded punctuation, commas, apostrophes, unnecessarily हम उनका usage जो है वो avoid कर सकें. So let's look at an example question for tip number 6. Yes. People who pursue careers in transportation planning have a wide variety of educational backgrounds. अब यहाँ पर हमारे पास इस सेंटेंस में क्या इशू है? People who pursue careers in transportation planning have a wide variety of educational backgrounds. अगर हम इस क्वेश्चन को देखें तो ये पढ़ के हमें साफ पता चल रहा है कि इस सेंटेंस में कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, which is why no change is going to be the correct answer. I am going straight to the correct answer because I would like to explain why all the other 3 options are incorrect quickly. So option B, people who pursue careers in transportation planning. अब यहाँ पर people, it's the subject of the sentence, and we do not need to separate it with the help of a comma because it's a restrictive clause. It's the important information in the sentence, so we cannot separate it with the help of a comma. So this comma is not required over here. And same is the case with the comma after planning. इसी तरह option C में भी people who pursue careers in transportation planning. अब यहाँ पर भी this phrase people who pursue careers, it's not a non-restrictive clause कि जिसको हमें comma से separate करना पड़े. इसी तरह in transportation planning is also an important essential part of the sentence. So both of these are essential elements, so we do not need to separate them with the help of a comma. Option D, people who pursue careers in transportation planning. Yes. So अब इसके साथ हम क्या प्रॉब्लम है कि यहाँ पर भी we do not require this comma because after the sentence we also have important information which is essential information, and before the sentence, in order to make a strong connection, we do not need this comma because the entire sentence is based on restrictive sentence elements. So that is why D is not going to be the correct answer. So we are only left with the most appropriate choice, which is A, no change, and that's the correct answer. And we should be able to differentiate between restrictive and non-restrictive sentence elements so that we do not put or eliminate unnecessary commas in the sentence or any other punctuation marks that are required within the sentence. Last tip, and an important one, of course, you must recognize and correct inappropriate uses of possessive nouns and pronouns, as well as differentiate between possessive and plural forms. It's also very important कि हमें difference पता हो possessive nouns और pronouns का, और हम उनका inappropriate, incorrect use जो है उसको ठीक कर सकें और उनको differentiate कर सकें between possessive and plural forms. Let's have a look at this example question for tip number 7. The transportation planner's job might involve conducting a traffic count to determine the daily number of vehicles traveling on the road to the new factory. अब यहाँ पर ये जो underline portion है, इसको हमें देखना है कि हमें इसको originally ये सही है या हमें इसको correct करना है. Do we have to edit it or do we need to keep it the same? The transportation planner's job. अब यहाँ पर the only problem for me in this sentence is the comma. It's not required over here because we are talking about the transportation planner and his job. So this is the subject of the sentence, the transportation planner. So we cannot separate it because this is restrictive information, restrictive sentence element. We cannot separate it with the help of the comma, which is why we will be choosing option B as the correct answer. We definitely need this apostrophe here because we are talking about the job of a transportation planner, a single person. So we need to have that apostrophe. However, this comma is not making sense over here at all, which is why we are not going to say that C is the right answer because it has the comma. And secondly, it's also missing out on the apostrophe. And D could not be the right answer because we are not talking about transportation planners as a plural subject. We are talking about a single transportation planner. And of course, it can't be A either because we do not need this comma. So we need to make sure that it's eliminated from the sentence. That's about it, guys, for the tips. अब हम लोग थोड़े से example questions करेंगे from the book so that we apply these tips and strategies and we make sure that we have a good idea of what kind of questions are going to be there in the writing section and हम उसमें थोड़ा सा लेके आ सके, वैरायटी लेके आ सके. जब हम टिप्स को यूज कर रहे होंगे, हम क्वेश्चंस को पढ़ रहे होंगे, सो वी वुड बी लुकिंग एट हाउ वी आर मेकिंग यूज ऑफ ऑल द टिप्स दैट वी हैव जस्ट गॉन थ्रू. वो नेचुरली हमारे अंदर इट्स गोइंग टू डेवलप कि हम इन टिप्स को स्टार्ट करना यूज करना स्टार्ट कर देंगे. सो लेट्स लुक एट द book now. I'm just going to share the book with you and you will be viewing the book for a sample passage and a variety of questions. So here we have the book and this is the passage. I'm just quickly going to read it out for you all so that we know what the questions are going to be all about, right? So let me read it out for you. Questions 1 to 11 are based on the following passage. Shed some light on the workplace. G. तो हमारे पास अब यहाँ पर एक छोटा सा पैसेज है और क्वेश्चन 1 और 2 हम इस पैराग्राफ से रिलेटेड है, तो हम इस पैराग्राफ को थोड़ा सा गो थ्रू कर लेते हैं बिकॉज द क्वेश्चंस आर बेस्ड ऑन द एंटायर पैराग्राफ. ओके, सो लेट्स जस्ट रीड देम आउट. Studies have shown that employees are happier, healthier, and more productive when they work in an environment in which temperatures are carefully controlled. अब यहाँ पर क्वेश्चन नंबर 1 जो है हम उसको जल्दी से कर लेते हैं बिफोर वी रीड आउट द रेस्ट ऑफ द पैसेज बिकॉज सेंटेंस नंबर 1, question number 1 is from the sentence that's given in the passage right in the beginning. So option A, no change. हमें इस phrase healthier and more को change करने की जरूरत है या नहीं, ये हमें देखना है. Studies have shown that employees are happier. अब happier जो है it is an adjective in the comparative form. Healthier is an adjective in the comparative form. And more productive. अब यहाँ पर हमारे पास जो appropriate choice है वो क्या हो सकती है? More productive को हम obviously productivier तो नहीं कर सकते because EIR cannot be added to the word productive. It's going to be more productive because this is the right comparative form of the adjective. So we can see that the concept that we are focusing on over here is parallelism, right? क्योंकि happier, healthier and more productive. अब option B में हमारे पास है healthy and more. अब healthy अगर हम यहाँ कर देंगे तो healthy is not going to be consistent with happier, right? Option C, healthier and they are. अब they are जो है it is not consistent with the rest of the sentence structure and parallelism जो है वो उससे maintain नहीं होता. So that is why they are को हमें sentence में add करने की बिल्कुल ज़रूरत नहीं है. It's going to be overworded. We don't need this in the sentence. More productive is the right way to write the sentence and we do not need they are before more productive. Then option D, healthier, being more. Being की भी हमें यहाँ पे बिल्कुल ज़रूरत नहीं है because the subject is employees. They are happier, healthier and more productive and we are targeting the employees directly while we talk about them throughout the sentence. So we don't need to add words like being or they are, which is why all of these options are going to be wrong and the right option is going to be option A. No change. We do not need a change over here. We do not need to change more productive. So this is going to be the right answer. Let's look at question number 2. Which choice provides the most appropriate introduction to the passage? अब इसके लिए तो हमें obviously passage को थोड़ा सा और भी go through करना पड़ेगा so that we are 100% sure कि हम जो answer choose करें it's not wrong. So let's read the rest of the passage. New buildings may be designed with these studies in mind, but many older buildings were not, resulting in spaces that often depend primarily on artificial lighting. While employers may balk at the expense of reconfiguring such buildings to increase the amount of natural light, the investment has been shown to be well worth it in the long run for both employees and employers. अब यहाँ पर हम बात कर रहे हैं natural lighting की importance की. So that is very obvious right from the beginning कि हम employers की health को और उनके moods को elevate कैसे कर सकते हैं with the help of more natural light sources in the office buildings, in their workplaces, because this is how we can improve their productivity. We can make sure they work in an environment which is healthier and happier for them, right? So the right answer for this question is going to be, let's look at all the options. A, no change. Obviously, no change to nahi ho sakta hai because this does not make sense at all. We have to choose an introduction to the passage. Option B, that affords them adequate amounts of natural light. Yes, this kind of makes sense. Ke offices may be employers need to have need to install adequate amounts of natural light. C, that is thoroughly sealed to prevent energy loss. हमने पैसेज अभी रीड किया है, हमने एनर्जी लॉस की यहाँ पे कोई बात नहीं की है, एंड वी हैव नॉट टॉक्ड अबाउट सीलिंग द ऑफिसेज to prevent loss of energy. So this is not making sense. Then option D, in which they feel comfortable asking managers for special accommodations. इस बारे में तो पूरे ही passage में we have not talked about this option. So option D is not relevant, C is not relevant, A is not relevant. So the right option for 2, the right answer for 2 is going to be B, because ways in which exposure to natural light affects employees is the main subject of the question. Okay, main subject, main introduction to the passage and the right answer for the question. Okay, let's move on to the next set of questions. I'm just quickly going to move on to the next set of questions so that we could attempt question number 3, 4, 5 and the rest of them. Okay, so for one thing, अब हम क्वेश्चन नंबर 3 को पहले रीड कर लेते हैं, फिर उसके बाद मैं पैसेज को देखूंगी कि मुझे पूरा गो थ्रू करने की जरूरत है या नहीं है. Question number 3. At this point, the writer is considering adding the following sentence. So after number 3, the writer is thinking to add this sentence. Workers in offices with windows sleep an average of 46 minutes more per night than workers in offices without windows. अब यहाँ पर बात हो रही है कंपैरिजन की कि ऑफिसेज में जितने भी वर्कर्स जो है उनकी विंडोज होती हैं वो ज़्यादा अपनी उनकी स्लीप एवरेज ज़्यादा होती है एज कम्पेयर टू वर्कर्स हु आर नॉट वर्किंग इन ऑफिसेज दैट हैव विंडोज, राइट? सो अब हम देखते हैं कि नंबर 3 सेंटेंस जो है उसके पहले कौन सा सेंटेंस है. I'm going to read it from here. Chicago showed that inadequate natural light could result in eye strain, headaches, and fatigue, as well as interference with the body's circadian rhythms. Circadian rhythms की बात हुई है सबसे एंड में. अब यहाँ पर अगर हम ये सेंटेंस ऐड कर देते हैं about their sleep schedule, the comparison of office workers and their sleep schedule, the ones with windows and without windows, do you think it makes sense? I don't think that it would make sense because it's talking about circadian rhythms right towards the end. और उसके बाद उन्होंने next sentence में circadian rhythms को ही explain किया हुआ है कि they are controlled by the body's biological clocks and what do they do in the body. So let's see, should the writer make this addition here? Should the writer use this sentence over here? Yes or no? Yes, because it supplies quantitative data that will be examined in the rest of the paragraph. I don't think that this sentence is providing data that we need for the rest of the paragraph. So option A is definitely not the right answer. I'm just going to mark it as wrong. Option B. Yes, because it explains the nature of the bodily functions referred to in the next sentence. No, it's not referring to the bodily functions. It's not talking about any of the body parts. It's just mentioning the sleep schedules, right? So that is why option B is not going to be the right option. ऑप्शन सी, क्योंकि हमने कहा कि हमारे पास नो ऑप्शन ज्यादा रेलेवेंट है, बिकॉज वी नीड टू सी कि जो सेंटेंस है वो सर्काडियन रिदम्स की बात कर रहा हो नेक्स्ट सेंटेंस में भी. सो दिस इज व्हाई एडिंग दिस सेंटेंस इज नॉट अ सेंसिबल चॉइस. ठीक है, सो नो, because it interrupts the discussion of circadian rhythms. And D, no, because it does not take into account whether workers were exposed to sunlight outside the office. Once again, D does not make sense. We do not need to know if the workers were exposed to sunlight outside the office or not. हम यहाँ पर सिर्फ circadian rhythms की बात कर रहे हैं. And keeping that in mind, we cannot interrupt the rest of the passage by adding this sentence over here. We need to keep the sentence, the whole passage in flow, the sentence is in coherence, which is why C is going to be the right answer and the rest of the answers are going to be incorrect. So the right answer for this question is C. Let's look at the next question, which is number 4. All right, so number 4 is no change, body's biological clocks, or body's biological clocks. B option has an apostrophe on top of S. We need to make sure कि हमारे पास बॉडीज बायोलॉजिकल क्लॉक्स बिल्कुल सही फॉर्म में लिखा हुआ हो, पोजेशन सही से शो हुई भी हो, अपॉस्ट्रोफी सही से शो हुए में हो, सब्जेक्ट जो है इट्स बॉडीज, राइट? We are talking about the body of a person and the biological clock inside the body. So the right answer, the correct possessive construction for body, which must be a singular noun, should be option C. C is the right answer. Why C is the right answer? Because जब हम sentence को read करते हैं, circadian rhythms which are controlled by the body's biological clocks. First thing, हमें bodies को plural करने की कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है, क्योंकि हम बाकी पूरे sentence में body की बात कर रहे हैं. Cycles of sleep, wakefulness, हम सिर्फ एक example of a body की बात कर रहे हैं to make the meaning of circadian rhythms and their function clear. So first thing, हमें bodies जो है उसको singular रखना है as a singular subject. So this is definitely going to require a change, which is why A is going to be the wrong answer, and I'll mark it as a wrong answer. B, bodies biological clocks. पहली बात ये कि हमारे पास bodies हमें plural form में रखने की लिखने की कोई जरूरत नहीं है, because we are talking about a particular example of a body, right? So we do not need to have an apostrophe here over here, and we do not need to have bodies in the plural form as a plural subject. Next, we do not need an apostrophe on top of clocks. We are talking about a person's biological clock, so we just do not need to have this apostrophe over here, because it's not appropriate to put it over here, keeping in mind कि ये possession नहीं show कर रहा है with the rest of the sentence. Then C, body's biological clocks. We have already chosen this as the correct answer, so this is the answer that makes most sense. Then D, body's biological clocks. अब यहाँ पे once again clocks जो है, it's not showing the correct form of possessive noun, which is why it's the incorrect, it's an incorrect option, right? So the reason why we have chosen C as the right answer is because it's showing correct possessive construction for body, which must be a singular noun, and also correct plural construction for clocks. So this is why C is the right answer. All right, let's move on to the next question and see what kind of a question is this going to be. I'm sure हम साथ साथ टिप्स को भी फॉलो कर रहे हैं, और जो हमने स्टैंडर्ड इंग्लिश कन्वेंशंस को भी डिस्कस किया था, हम साथ साथ उनको भी अपने माइंड में रखते हुए पैरेललिज्म, वर्ब कंसिस्टेंसी, अननीडेड पंक्चुएशन, सारी चीज़ों को हम we are keeping them in mind and we are incorporating them while we practice these questions. Okay, then we have question number 5. For question number 5, we need to change the underlined part, which is. अब इसको हमें या तो चेंज करना है या नहीं करना है. लेट्स रीड आउट द सेंटेंस, द प्रीसीडिंग सेंटेंस, बिकॉज दिस इज वन ऑफ द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट टिप्स. Like any other health problems, These ailments can increase employee absenteeism, which in turn is costly for employers. अब यहाँ पर बात हो रही है सेंटेंस में कुछ चीज़ों की, एलिमेंट्स की बात हो रही है, फिर उसके बाद बात हुई है एम्प्लॉय एब्सेंटीइज्म की, which in turn is costly for employers. अब absenteeism की जब बात होगी, we are talking in the context of one employee only, right? So we do not need to change is. So according to me, the right answer is going to be no change. अब अगर हम यहाँ पे कर देते हैं BR, which in turn are costly for employers, तो हम यहाँ पर बिल्कुल इसको सेंटेंस की स्ट्रक्चर को गलत कर देंगे, बिकॉज आर इज नॉट रेलिवेंट विद द discussion that was preceding in the sentence, employee absenteeism, which is a singular subject. So keeping that in mind, we cannot choose the option B. So B is definitely not going to be the right answer. हमने A को right answer अभी तक choose किया हुआ है, B is not the right answer. Then C is being. अब देखते हैं is being हमारे लिए correct हमें sound करे या नहीं. These ailments can increase employee absenteeism, which in turn is being costly for employers. Once again, we don't need to make it overworded, keeping in mind economy of expression, keeping in mind concise style of writing and reading. We need to make sure कि being हम यहाँ add ना करें, इसको overworded ना करें. So C is not the right answer. Then D, have been. Employee absenteeism, which in turn have been costly for employees. Once again, have is a plural verb, so we cannot add it with a singular subject. Employee absenteeism is इसके साथ जो agree कर रहा है word, that is only is costly for employers. इसके साथ जो verb agree कर रहा है, that is only is. So is agrees with absenteeism and others fail to agree with the single subject which is mentioned in the sentence in the preceding part of the sentence. So I hope that makes sense कि why no change is the right answer for this question. All right, now let's move on to the next question guys and see कि अगला question हमसे किस तरह के answer की demand कर रहा है. Question number 6, here we have question number 6. Let's read it out. Which sentence best supports the statement made in the previous sentence? अब इसके लिए हमें लास्ट सेंटेंस को भी रीड करना पड़ेगा, ठीक है? सो लास्ट सेंटेंस को हम रीड करते हैं एंड वी विल फाइंड आउट व्हाट इज द इंफॉर्मेशन गिवन. Employees who feel less than 100% are sleep deprived and are sleep deprived are also less prone to work at their maximal productivity. अच्छा, अब यहाँ पर इन्होंने बात की है प्रोडक्टिविटी की और इन्होंने बात की है कि कुछ एम्प्लॉयज़ जो है उनकी प्रोडक्टिविटी डिक्रीज हो जाती है जब वो 100% एनर्जाइज फील नहीं कर रहे होते और स्लीप डिप्राइव्ड होते हैं. दे आर नॉट एबल टू शो एज मच एनर्जी व्हेन इट कम्स टू देयर वर्क प्रोडक्टिविटी. So which choice in question 6, which choice best supports the statement made in the previous sentence? A, no change. B, saw a 5% increase in productivity. C, saved a great deal on its operational costs. D, invested large amounts of time and capital. अब यहाँ पर जो सबसे appropriate choice है मेरे ख्याल में, that is going to be option B. Why B? Because when you look at the sentence, it ends talking about productivity. And then in the next sentence also we see one company in California gained a huge boost in its employees' morale. अब यहाँ पर हम मोराल की बात करें जबकि यहाँ पर प्रोडक्टिविटी की बात हो रही है. सो इन ऑर्डर टू मेक श्योर कि हमारा डायरेक्ट रेफरेंस जो है वो प्रोडक्टिविटी के साथ हो, वी नीड टू चूज द option that talks about productivity. So saw a 5% increase in productivity is the right choice, and we need to replace the underlined part with a mention of productivity, employee productivity, because this is what is consistent with the preceding sentence. So other two sentences, they are not relevant in the context of what is being discussed in the last 4 lines. Saved a great deal on its operational cost. This is not under discussion in the towards the ending of this passage. And then D, invested large amounts of time and capital. Once again, हम इसके बारे में बात नहीं कर रहे हैं. We are talking about employees' productivity, which is why B is going to be the right answer and it's going to make sense. for us, right? So let's move on to the next question and see what is the next question asking us to do. Question number 7. क्वेश्चन नंबर 7 जो है वो थोड़ा सा चैलेंजिंग भी है, लेकिन इसको डिस्कस करेंगे, हर ऑप्शन को गो थ्रू करेंगे और अंडरस्टैंड करने की कोशिश करेंगे. क्वेश्चन नंबर 7. In context, which choice best combines the underlying sentences? Let's read the two sentences first and let's try to combine them in the most appropriate manner. Artificial light sources are also costly aside from lowering worker productivity. They typically constitute anywhere from 25 to 50% of a building's energy use. इन दोनों सेंटेंसेस में जो सबसे ज़्यादा इम्पॉर्टेंट चीज़ डिस्कस हुई है वो ये हुई है कि आर्टिफिशियल लाइट सोर्सेज दे आर कॉस्टली, राइट, एंड दे डिक्रीज वर्कर प्रोडक्टिविटी. और यही बात जो है वो पिछले पैराग्राफ में भी एक्सप्लेन की गई थी वर्कर प्रोडक्टिविटी की, राइट. सो कीपिंग दैट इन माइंड, we are going to read out all of the options and see which one makes the best choice. A. Aside from lowering worker productivity, artificial light sources are also costly, typically constituting anywhere from 25 to 50% of a building's energy use. Sounds good. इसमें सबसे पहले उसने मेंशन किया है कि वर्कर प्रोडक्टिविटी को भी डिक्रीज कर देते हैं और they are also costly, they are expensive, and they use a lot of energy when they are installed in a building, right? Then option B, the cost of artificial light sources aside from lowering worker productivity typically constitutes anywhere from 25 to 50% of a building's energy use. Then C, बी ऑप्शन जो है इट ऑल्सो साउंड्स फाइन, बट इसमें सबसे पहले उन्होंने कॉस्ट की बात की है और हम इस पूरे पैसेज में जिस चीज़ पर सबसे ज़्यादा फोकस कर रहे हैं वो है एम्प्लॉयज़ की हेल्थ, उनकी प्रोडक्टिविटी, एंड वी आर नॉट रियली फोकसिंग ऑन द कॉस्ट, राइट. देन ऑप्शन सी, typically constituting 25 to 50% of a building's energy use, artificial light sources lower worker productivity and are costly. Once again, we are talking about the energy levels that increase when we use artificial light sources in a building. So this is why option C जो है उसमें उस चीज़ के बारे में बात नहीं की गई जो इस सेंटेंस में सबसे ज़्यादा important है, which is that artificial light sources lower work productivity and secondly they are also costly. तो इसमें जो है डायरेक्टली सबसे पहले एनर्जी कंजम्पशन की बात की गई है, which is why C to me does not seem like the right answer. Next we have D. Artificial lights which lower worker productivity and are costly typically constitute anywhere from 25 to 50% of a building's energy use. अब यहाँ पर जो artificial lights हैं, they lower worker productivity, इसके बारे में बात की गई है, कॉमा से सेपरेट किया हुआ है. अब हम लोगों ने डिसाइड करना है कि इनमें से कौन सी ऑप्शन सही है. मेरे हिसाब से जो मुझे सबसे ज़्यादा सेंसिबल चॉइसेस लगी हैं, I found A and D the most appropriate choices. Why? Because both of them are talking about worker productivity right in the beginning of the sentence. Now we need to see कि structure सबसे ज़्यादा किसका सही है. So if you look at option A, it opens with reference to lower worker productivity and it creates a transition from the previous paragraph. Like I mentioned कि पूरे पैसेज में जो सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट बात की है वो वर्कर हेल्थ और प्रोडक्टिविटी की गई है एंड नॉट अबाउट द कॉस्ट, अबाउट द एनर्जी कंजम्पशन ऑफ इंस्टॉलिंग आर्टिफिशियल लाइट सोर्सेज. सो लोअर वर्कर प्रोडक्टिविटी पे जब एम्फेसाइज किया जा रहा है, सो जो सबसे जो अप्रोप्रिएट चॉइस है वो हमारे पास ऑप्शन ए बन रही है because it has a correct and concise sentence structure, whereas option B, once again we can see commas, artificial lights के बाद we can see a comma, whereas we do not require a comma over here. ये यहाँ पर इस comma की बिल्कुल भी कोई sense नहीं बन रही है because this is artificial lights is not it's basically not non-essential part of the sentence. It is restrictive and element of a sentence, so it cannot be separated with a comma, which lower worker productivity and are costly. Once again a comma, which is why this option is not going to make sense. So the right answer is going to be A, showing a smooth transition from the previous paragraph and talking about the most important point, which is lowering worker productivity, which is like coming straight to the point when you are focusing on something, focusing on the most important bit of the passage. So this is why A is the right answer. Okay, let's move on to the next question and see what the next question has in store for us. Question number 8. जी, क्वेश्चन नंबर 8 जो है वो हमारे पास इस लास्ट सेंटेंस के बारे में बात कर रहा है एंड इट्स अ वेरी सिंपल क्वेश्चन. सी आई मेंशन कि कुछ क्वेश्चंस हम लोग बहुत जल्दी कर लेंगे विद इन 10 to 20 सेकेंड्स. तो दिस इज वन सच क्वेश्चन जिसपे हमें बहुत ज़्यादा टाइम नहीं लगेगा और हमें इसको पढ़ने में भी, ऑप्शंस को रीड करने में भी इट वुड हार्डली टेक अस अ फ्यू सेकेंड्स एंड वी विल बी डन विद इट. सो वी कैन सेव दिस टाइम टू डू अ डिफिकल्ट क्वेश्चन लाइक द प्रीवियस वन which took us longer because this question required a reading of the options, making sense out of the options and then choosing the most appropriate one. Question number 8 में we have to see कि each year जो phrase है हम उसको change करना चाहिए हमें या नहीं करना चाहिए. Let's read the entire sentence and let's understand कि sentence में what are they talking about. When a plant in Seattle, Washington was redesigned for more natural light, the company was able to enjoy annual electricity cost reductions of $500,000 each year. अच्छा, अब ये तो पढ़ते ही पता चल गया कि the word annual is already mentioned over there. We don't need to mention each year. Once again, it's becoming overworded. We need to keep it concise, to the point. We do not need to make it overworded. We need to keep in mind economy of expression and the use of words sensibly. So the right answer is going to be option D. Delete the underlined portion and end the sentence with a period. It cannot be every year because every year has the same meaning as the word annual, which is mentioned in the sentence already. Per year bhi nahi, because per year also means annual. So D is going to be the right option that we are going to choose from. Delete the underlined portion and end the sentence with a period. So we end the sentence here right after 500,000. So I hope this is clear to you, and this question did not take long at all. We have chosen the right answer, which is D. All right, let's move on to the next question. Question number 9. Question number 9 is going to talk about a phrase, a transitional word. Thus, we need to change or we do not need to change it. That is what we are going to decide when we are going to read question number 9. अब question number 9 को हमने इस underlined portion को देखना है कि do we need to change it or not. It's a transition word, so we need to read the preceding sentence to understand it better and to see if this makes sense or if we need to change it. Among the possibilities to reconfigure a building's lighting is the installation of full pane windows to allow the greatest degree of sunlight to reach office interiors. Yes, अब यहाँ पर we can see that thus जो है एक ऐसा transition word है which is not making sense. This sentence is telling us about another opinion that companies could use, another option that companies could use. We can install full pane windows to allow the greatest degree of sunlight to reach office interiors. We are talking about possibilities here. So possibilities की जब हम बात करते हैं और फिर next sentence में हमने क्या बात की है? Thus, businesses can install light tubes. These are pipes placed in workplaces, workplace roofs to capture and funnel sunlight down into a building's interior. अब ये एक उन्होंने it's kind of another option that we can use. So ये एक possibility तो हमने इसमें बात कर ली और फिर second possibility की बात हम करें in the next sentence. Thus is a word, a transition word, जो हमें पिछले sentence से कोई conclusion draw करके हमें sentence को आगे mention कर रहा होता है. So thus is the wrong transition word. So definitely the first answer A is going to be the wrong option to choose from. So it can't be option A. We are going to say option A, no change is wrong. We definitely need to change the word thus, right? So let's choose the most appropriate transition word. Nevertheless. Nevertheless is a transition word that means however. अब however जो है वो एक ऐसा ट्रांजिशन वर्ड है जिसकी यहाँ पर कोई सेंस नहीं बन रही है. वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट पॉसिबिलिटीज ऑफ हाउ वी कैन रिकन्फिगर अ बिल्डिंग्स लाइटिंग, राइट? तो इसमें हम जब पॉसिबिलिटीज की बात करें तो हाउएवर का वर्ड तो हम तब यूज करते हैं जब हम किसी चीज की दूसरी साइड की बात कर रहे होते हैं. व्हेन वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट टू डिफरेंट साइड्स, सो हाउएवर इट्स यूज्ड फॉर टू शो कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन. So this is why however is not the suitable choice. Nevertheless, which also means however is not a suitable choice. Alternatively, alternatively means another option, another choice, another possibility. Alternatively makes sense over here. If we choose the transition word alternatively, businesses can install light tubes. These are pipes placed in a workplace roof, roofs to capture and funnel sunlight down into a building's interior. So C makes sense over here, which is why we can replace the word thus with alternatively. Then we have finally. अब finally जब एक बात होती है ना, तो finally is like the last thing that we are mentioning. यहाँ पर अगर हम देखें तो next sentence में glass walls and dividers can also be used to replace solid walls as a means through distributing natural light more freely. Another possibility. So जब हम possibilities की बात करें, इस sentence में भी possibility है, इसमें भी एक और alternative है to reconfigure a building's lighting, और फिर sentence जो next है इसमें भी एक possibility है. तो फाइनली तो हमारे पास सेंटेंस नंबर 9 में आ ही नहीं सकता. सो द राइट आंसर फॉर अस इज डेफिनेटली गोइंग टू बी ऑप्शन सी, alternatively, because we are switching from one possibility to another in all of these sentences. We're talking about all the possibilities. So alternatively is telling us about another option that companies could use, and it makes sense, and it makes the most appropriate choice for question number 9's answer. Let's look at question number 10. Question number 10. Thus, businesses can install light tubes. These are pipes placed in workplace roofs to capture and funnel sunlight down into a building's interior. अब यहाँ पर these are को हमें change करने की ज़रूरत है या नहीं है? Let's find out. Actually, when we say these are, तो हम किसी चीज़ की बड़ी directly बात कर रहे होते हैं. These are. हम इस सेंटेंस में ऑलरेडी बात कर चुके हैं बिजनेसेस कैन इंस्टॉल लाइट ट्यूब्स, और हमने यहाँ सेंटेंस को एंड नहीं किया है. तो अगर हम इस कॉमा को इंक्लूड करें, सो वी डोंट नीड टू यूज द प्रोनाउन दीज ओवर हियर, राइट? सो फर्स्ट थिंग्स फर्स्ट, दैट ऑप्शन ए इज नॉट द राइट आंसर, इट्स एन इनकरेक्ट चॉइस. देन लेट्स लुक एट द नेक्स्ट वन, दे आर. अब दे आर जो है, once again it's not the correct pronoun, the relative pronoun that makes a connection with the comma, क्योंकि हम बात करें businesses can install light tubes, comma they are. या तो ये न्यू सेंटेंस होता, यहाँ फुल स्टॉप होता, तो फिर तो they are की सेंस बनती थी, इस प्रोनाउन they की सेंस बनती थी. But now it's not making sense, just like these is not making sense. Next one is C, which are. Which are is making a good connection with the rest of the sentence because there is a comma right before which are, and if we replace these are with which are, so we can see that it makes sense, and we can say, let's read the sentence with which are in it. Thus, businesses can install light tubes, which are pipes placed in workplace roofs. Yes, now this makes sense. हमने simply इस pronoun को एक और relative pronoun से replace कर दिया, इसको which कर दिया, और and it makes perfect sense, right? So this is the correct relative pronoun to correspond to our light tubes that we are talking about earlier in the sentence, right? Last option तो बिल्कुल भी नहीं हो सकती है. Those being, once again, it would not make sense. Even if there is a full stop over here, those being is not going to make sense at all. So this was the right answer, which is C, and we are done with this. Okay, let's move on to the last question, and after that we wrap up the session and we will be done with the practice of the writing section. Question number 11. Yes. So here we are going to change the word through. We are either going to change it or we are going to keep it the same depending on its usage. If it's used correctly, तो फिर हमें obviously change नहीं करना होगा. glass walls and dividers can also be used to replace solid walls as a means through distributing natural light more freely. अब यहाँ पर through जो है it's a preposition. Does it make sense? हमने बात की glass walls and dividers can also be used to replace solid walls as a means through distributing natural light more freely. Through does not make sense because we are not talking about looking through something. We are talking about distributing natural light more freely through glass walls or dividers. So this preposition for, that we are going to choose needs to follow the idiomatically mentioned expression, which is the noun. Glass walls and dividers can also be used to replace solid walls as a means of, as a means of. ठीक है, तो of is the right option and we are going to replace of through with of. So of is going to be the right choice. Why it cannot be from? Let's read out from. Glass walls and dividers can also be used to replace solid walls as a means from distributing natural light more freely. Wrong. It doesn't make sense अगर हम यहाँ पर from लिख देते हैं. From distributing natural light more freely does not make sense. Not the right preposition to use. And delete the underlined portion. If we delete it, once again, it would not make sense. Let's read it without through, without of. Glass walls and dividers can also be used to replace solid walls as a means distributing natural light more freely. Now, if we eliminate the preposition, then definitely the sentence is going to be incomplete, not clear, and it's not going to make sense at all. So of is the important preposition that we need to use when we refer to the subject glass walls and dividers, and then when they replace solid walls to distribute natural light more freely, right? So yes, so this is going to bring us to the writing session, and we have already discussed the examples. Now we are familiar with what the writing section looks like. We are familiar with the most important 7 tips that we discussed, and we know how we are going to tackle the questions in the writing section. I'm sure this session is going to be helpful when you're going to be practicing for your writing section. And please make sure that you make good use of these tips and apply them to your writing section so that you can ace your writing section. Thank you so much. Take care. Allah Hafiz.